Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Max, for the tech support, and thank you, everyone, for being here. Mark, it's fortuitous that you said that your blessing that you are asking for today is bitachon. That was what I asked for as well, and I put it in the chat. And that is the topic of our teaching this afternoon. Bitachon, trust, faith. Where does it come from? How do we hold on to it? And I want to share a teaching on the Torah portion this week. We're beginning Sefer Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, which opens with Moshe recounting some of the journeying that the people of Israel have been doing through the desert, focusing on a couple of particular events and episodes. One of those being the account of the scouts who were sent to the land of Israel to kind of report back on all of its goodness and the possibility for entering the land. And of course, 10 of them came back and said, we can't do it. Their people are too big, the cities are too fortified, we'll never be able to do it. And that, of course, was the catalyst or the reason for Bnei Israel having to wander in the desert for another 38 years. And so the teaching this morning comes from Rachel Annisfeld, who was a former community member with me many years ago in a minyan we were part of, and now has a wonderful website where she offers mindfulness teachings on the Torah portion and holidays. And she points out, and thank you, Max, this is exactly what I wanted to look at right now. She points out that after Moshe has recounted this incident of the scouts, or the spies as they're generally referred to, that in verse 32 of this first chapter of Devarim, Moshe says, Uvidvar hazeh einchem ma'aminim b'Adonai Elohechem. Yet for all that, or I think a little more sharply translated, for this thing, davar, thing, hazeh, for this thing, you have no faith in Adonai, your God. So what is this thing, she asks, and proposes that Moshe, whether he intends it or not, offers us a lesson in our own spiritual growth and an opportunity in our own spiritual growth. She says there are three things that we might understand to be the lack of faith that Moshe is speaking about in this verse. The first is a lack of faith in God's carrying us. Looking immediately at the pasuk before this one, which gives us the image of God carrying you as a person carries his son, right? That beautiful, beautiful image of being held and being supported, being moved forward when we ourselves can't move ourselves forward. And this is the first thing that the people don't have faith in, that God is there to carry us, to continue to carry us. The second is a lack of belief or a lack of faith in the process, the journey that they have just been through, that it will conclude with something wonderful. And that's based on Rashi's comment, which is there on the right-hand side of the screen. Rashi says, "Uvidavar hazeh," this thing, what is the thing? The thing is God's promise to bring you to the land. And so there is a lack of faith that the journey is going to end in this promise, that it's not all for naught. And then the third place of non-believing or non-trust is in the experience and the words of the 10 scouts and the people's response to them, that we can't do it. We won't actually be able to fight with the people who are there. We will not be able to conquer the land. We don't have faith in ourselves. So faith in God as carrying us, faith that the journey that we're on will lead us to somewhere meaningful, prosperous, nourishing, and faith in our own abilities to be on that journey, to do that work, to get to that place. Thank you, Max. You can stop the share now. This is a very resonant teaching for me, particularly right now. I think it's easy to look around at the world and really wonder, is God carrying me? Is God carrying us as humanity? This journey that we are on, either on the micro level in my own life, on the macro level, and looking at the earth and its inhabitants, where is it leading us? Will it really take us somewhere? And do I really have what it takes to do my work in the world, to be in the world? These are questions of doubt that arise for me, may arise for you. We want to offer a meditation in bitachon to help us practice this muscle of faith, strength, trust. If you've come out of your mindfulness and awareness of your seat or your posture, I invite you to return to that awareness and specifically focus on the way you are being supported right now by the chair or cushion underneath you, the floor under your feet. How are you being carried? Just by virtue of sitting here or standing here, you have perhaps unconscious awareness of your trust in the chair, that it will hold you, in the floor, that it will give way to your steps and not collapse. This physical sensation, we can experience it, can view it as the embodiment of trust. I feel the chair beneath me. I trust that it will hold me. And now you can turn your attention to your breath. Just gently noticing how the body is breathing today. Where is there movement, undulation, lift and fall with each inhale and exhale? When we are healthy, and please God, we should all be healthy, we don't much think of the breath. Again, an unconscious trust. I simply trust that my body will breathe, that the next breath will come, that the intake will go through all of the channels and circulation that it needs to in my body. and that I will then exhale that which is not needed. The breath is another place where we can put our trust only for a moment. So we're going to take the next 10 minutes or so, 10, 12 minutes in silence. And of course, if there is an anchor that you are working with in your own practice, you can use that. But I would encourage or invite you for today to use one of these anchors. Either the sensations, the physical sensation of being held by your chair or cushion, the points of connection between your body and your seat, or if you're standing, your feet and the floor, or the breath. And when your mind wanders, and then you notice that you've wandered, and you bring your attention back to the physical experience or the breath, you can imagine yourself replacing trust in your body, in the chair, in your breath. Another way to, for some people, to strengthen the experience of trust or the feeling of trust in the breath is that with each exhale, you think the words, just this breath, just right here in this moment, I am being supported. I am breathing. I am alive. Just this breath, or just this moment. Unfocusing your gaze or allowing the eyes to close. See that the jaw is soft and the tongue is heavy in the mouth. Bring your attention to that little thing in which you can place your trust at this moment. Floor beneath you, the breath within you. And that's it. just this breath, just this moment. When we are feeling weak in our bitachon, in our ability to trust in God carrying us in the purposefulness of our journeys, or even in ourselves, we can find a small place of trust in our seat, in our breath, in our bodies. May we be blessed with the ability to cultivate this bitachon so that it becomes stronger in all the ways that it will enable us to flourish, to be close to others, and to be close to God. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Rabbi Shuli Passow. Your beautiful teaching to as we move towards the month of Av and begin to move through the book of Devarim. Thank you so much. And friends, we seal today's beautiful practice, offering an opportunity for those of you who are in mourning or observing a yard site, or if it's your custom to join in the Kaddish, to do so. If you're not reciting Kaddish, we encourage you to please stay present for those who are. Offer your support and presence for those in mourning. If you are reciting Kaddish, you're invited to put the name or names of anyone you're honoring, remembering today in the chat. Now or after we recite the Kaddish. Thanks to Max for sharing the words on the screen. And if you're reciting Kaddish, I invite you to join me by rising in body or in spirit, and you can unmute at this time. Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbi,
Amen.
Na'amad
Amen.
V'rach, V'yarik Mordechai, V'ayikol V'chayet Kol Beit Yisrael, V'agalam Zman Karev V'yavu Amen. Shemei Rabba V'rach V'yarik V'ayach V'rach
Sadavi Salavi Salash Miner
V'yavam
Chokra Limit Kopakasha Veshurasa
V'yishveh
Sabenachamasa
Shalom
Kamiramba
V'yikol
Maviamba
Amen.
Shlama Rabba
La Mikol
Kayamo and
V'yitzav
Galko Israel Amen. Shalom Gamara Uyasa
Iran Ba'amol
Maybe
V'yireh Amen.
prayer prayer
Ishlama Rabba Yishmaya Amen. El Kol Yisrael Ya'alu Amen. Aseh Shalom B'Ramah Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu Ke'al Kol Yisrael Ya'akol Yoshvei Kevel V'Yimru
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Once again, thanks to you, Rabbi Shuli, for leading us today. Thanks to Max Bamberger for holding our tech space with grace and skill. And most of all, of course, as always, thanks to each of you for being here to create this community of practice and this mini Shabbat, this mini retreat that we get to, gives an opportunity to renew each day. Reminder that Rabbi Shuli leads meditation sessions for Congregation B'nai Jeshurun every Wednesday at 8:45 a.m. Max, if you can find the link, put it back in, that'd be great. I also, of course, want to thank Joan Sudman Shapiro for sponsoring today's sit in loving memory of her dad, Henry J. Sudman, on the occasion of his yard site. Zichrono Livracha, may his memory always be a blessing for you, Joan. Thank you so much for supporting our practice together today. Just before, for those of you who are leaving us, just want to let you know we have another wonderful lineup of teachers this week. Tomorrow, Yael Shai will be back to lead us. Tuesday, Wednesday is Rosh Chodesh Av, and Sarah Waxman of At the Well will be here to lead us. On Thursday, Rabbi Shefa Gold, and I'm happy to share that Rebecca Schisser will be back to lead us to sit into Shabbat together on Friday. So beautiful week of practice, and hope you can join us for any or all of those opportunities. So if you're leaving us now, we hope to see you soon. And if you're staying on, you're welcome to share your reflections on today's sit or ask a question. If it's a question, please put it in the chat and preface it by writing question in all caps. And I will do my best to keep an eye and get to the questions. And we didn't rehearse this. So it was fortuitous, serendipitous, whatever, that we were on the same bitachon trust wavelength there, Shuli. And I was really, I guess, as I was sitting, and as you said, I really, what was the word you used when you were encouraging people to come back to the anchor of breath or sensation of support?
To
Replace. Right. I love that. That was great. Replace your trust. So there were a lot of things bubbled up for me. Like as soon as you said, you would just refer to how challenged we are these days, on all fronts, basically, personally, collectively. I was thinking about, it brought up thoughts about negativity bias. My daughter I was actually reading a physical paper the other day, and my daughter said, "So what's the bad news today?" And actually I said, the lead story is kind of encouraging. It's like, but it just really reminded me of, that's the expectation. We're just looking for anything that's going to be unsettling, right? And upsetting, that reinforces the vulnerability. But then as I was sitting with your instructions and coming back to that sense of, what it feels like to feel supported. You know what it's like to count on something and have it happen, right? And I understood you as kind of inviting us to kind of build that spiritual muscle by coming back to it. Like it's like almost like doing trust reps, and do both, maybe we can bolster our capacity for that. That it requires being willing to be vulnerable, because I don't have any control over that. Like, I don't have any control over the chair. I don't control whether the breath is going to come to me or not. It may or may not in any given moment. Of course, most of the time, or at least while I'm alive, it does. But the chair has not yet collapsed under me. But it could. It could. It could. So I guess my point is that especially where we are in the Jewish calendar in this period of the 3 weeks and moving towards Av and the 9 days and the 9th of Av, which is, as Alan Liu famously, beautifully describes in his book, This is Real and Completely Unprepared, really is about letting ourselves fall apart, right? And letting go of control, really totally letting go of control and trusting that we're going to be okay in some way. And it's not easy. I guess the question that's at the end of this isn't vulnerability something that we resist moving towards, which makes it hard for us to trust. It's almost like a paradox that I don't want to feel vulnerable. I want to feel like I'm in control. But, and this is maybe one of the great Jewish teachings, because it's the teaching of Sukkot, right? It's the ultimate, all this leads towards Sukkot, which is about feeling trust and feeling totally vulnerable at the same time. So this is the beginning of that process. But I'm noticing, I'm resistant to this. I'm pushing this away. I don't want to feel trust, because then I have to feel vulnerable because I'm dependent on something beyond myself. So I think there's a question in there where you can just maybe respond to that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. To trust in anything, you do have to admit, and I'm not in control, and that is very, very challenging for many of us. I think that in the teaching that I offered, the third place of trustlessness, of lack of trust, is a little bit different in that sense. Although, let's talk it out. Maybe it's not. That what happens when we lose the trust in ourselves, in the trust in our own ability to do whatever lies before us. Let me think about that. How does vulnerability play into that? I'm not sure it does in the same way as what you're describing.
Mhm.
But I think you do have to take a risk, even
Mm.
if you trust that you have the skills, the knowledge, the capacity to take on whatever task it is. There is always the risk that you won't succeed. So perhaps in that sense, there is a vulnerability that we need to be ready to embrace if we are going to trust in ourselves, and not be too attached to the outcome, but to move
Yeah.
forward beyond that, despite that. So thank you for that. I think the vulnerability piece is definitely core to this process, is noticing the resistance, noticing the resistance to being vulnerable. And that's another place to work, another practice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess as I'm thinking about it and listening to you, I'm thinking that is a way to work with it in the practice. Like I could have in that moment, as I noticed that, like, I don't want to, there was resistance, and that's a natural human reaction.
Mhm.
Right. And so to not judge that and but not also give it the power, just to kind of notice there is an anxiety or fear around that. There's an anxiety about being anxious,
Mhm.
and bring compassion to that. Relates to this question. Well, first thing I wanted to say, a couple of questions just about defining the Hebrew here, since we're using bitachon,
Yeah.
translating as trust, but there's a question about what's the root of that word, what's the essence or connotation of that word. Um, do you want
Right.
to take that?
So Nancy, thank you, Nancy, for writing in the chat. Bitachon is security, safety, guarantee, and that's great because it's all of those things and more. And there's a trust that's implicit in all of those things. I don't think it's a word that has an exact translation in the English language. In contemporary Hebrew, the word bitachon means security. You'll see it on the back of the shirts of security guards if you go to Israel and encounter those folks at the airport, etc. The word betach means sure, for sure. I'll go, let's go tomorrow. Betach, let's go. Right. So there's that sense of, yes, surely this will happen, or for sure I'm on board with this. So that's kind of two ways that we see it in the modern and contemporary Hebrew. And so the root is bet taf chet.
Mhm.
Sorry, bet
Tet. Yeah.
bet tet chet. Bet tet chet. Where is it used in the Torah? I cannot think of an example offhand. I would say I'm not sure if it's in
It's in the Psalms a lot. I would say
I was
it's
just
in
gonna
the
say
Psalms a lot,
it's
right?
in the Psalms. I don't know if it's in the Chumash, in the Pentateuch, but certainly we see it in the Psalms.
Yeah. I was going to ask you a question also about the difference between belief and trust, but I'm going to put that to the side for a minute, because there's a good question, as always, from Lori about suggestions for like this is bringing the practice into life, and she's referencing two incidents with herself and mom where they were each afraid that EMTs would drop them as they were transporting them in an ambulance, where it was a real possibility. And then Sarah wrote about developing a chronic illness in midlife, which led to feeling incredibly vulnerable, but having no choice but to trust, which I guess is kind of a response to what I was saying. Like sometimes we realize we just are vulnerable. There's no way around it. And so what is left is that trust. And maybe that's a kind of stripping away of the illusion of control. But what's the suggestion for practice in a moment like that, when I mean, we could all have it at different times. when things are really out of our control, and they may not go well. I'm thinking of, oh, my car goes into a skid, right? And I've lost control of the car. I can't actually control, and I don't know how this is going to end up, right? What does bitachon or trust look like in a moment of where we really don't know the outcome? And I guess the question here is a little bit: is it going to be okay? Like what is okay?
Yeah.
That was another thing that came up for me. Like I was thinking about a mantra, like while I was sitting, I'm with you, I'm with you, I'm with you, or just presence. But it doesn't mean that everything's going to turn out great.
No, it doesn't. I don't know I don't think that's the definition of bitachon, that everything's going to be, I trust that everything's going to be fine. So look, I think this is a really personal question, and different people will have, relate differently to that anxiety over something not being okay. Certainly there's, a whole field of psychology that deals with phobias and how people can overcome phobias, knowing, rationally that it is possible to get into a car accident, but I'm still going to learn how to get into a car and not have the anxiety overwhelm me. So that's not my bread and butter. But I think on a spiritual level, just the question about the EMTs. First of all, I'm so sorry that you both had this experience of having to go in an ambulance, and wish you whatever healing and health you need at this moment. I don't know. I think that might be a place where you could almost play with the kind of practice we were doing today, of taking the attention off of the people and putting it onto the connection between your body and the stretcher or the mattress, or the, whatever it is that you're on, because the worry about the EMTs, that's in our minds, and we know that when we're anxious, one thing that can be helpful is to come back to the body, what's happening in the body. So bring the attention to that and say, I'm being supported by this mattress underneath me, by this stretcher underneath me, whatever that is. I have not had a chronic illness, Sarah, so I don't want to presuppose that there's a one practice that would help. I can't even speak to my own to my own experience with that.
Raise hand.
And again, for you, I want to say, wish you a refuah shlema and the healing that you need. And I think you made it. It's interesting that you say I had no choice, but I think you made a choice to trust. I do think that is a choice, because one could be in a place of illness and choose to only think about the negative possibilities, to only imagine the worst case scenarios. My mother has a friend who, this is her view on everything in life. How was your trip to Europe? Oh, it rained, the hotel was too small, this, right? The only thing that one sees, and that's obviously a very different circumstance than illness, but certainly people who are ill can wallow in that. I'm not saying it's an easy choice to say, okay, I'm going to do the work to cultivate trust, to cultivate, again, not necessarily trust that everything will work out okay, but trust that there's something holding me through this. I had a difficult pregnancy with my first son, and I was in the hospital a lot. And one of the nurses told me the women who carry the longest are the women who can manage their anxiety. That if you sit there being anxious, it shows up in the body, and if you can find whatever way it is to practice being, letting go of that anxiety, or embracing a sense of trust in oneself and one's body. Clearly it helps, and that was true for me. I can say that to be the case.
All right, I think it's time to wrap up. I wanted to thank you again, Shuli, and it's a reminder that each day we get to engage in this practice is really, whether we're focusing on this terminology or not, is replacing our sense of trust, and doing those reps of supporting our bitachon and being able to be present and not surrender to negativity, or the instinct to look for the, only for what's problematic, and to experience gratitude in the midst of anxiety, and optimism in the midst of anxiety. So again, Shuli, thank you so much. It's always a big treat to have you lead us, and thank you for all you're doing. It's great to
Thank
share
you
it.
for questions and comments.
And thank you, Joan, for sponsoring us today, and Max for holding our space, and each of you for being here. Hope to see you tomorrow with Yael Shai at our usual time. Many blessings.